Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to be looking at plot. Before we get there, I just want to show you this quick agenda. This will be in your Canvas, and Mrs. Wallace and I's goal is that you go through this every day and are able to find where you're supposed to be going. So today we'd want to click on the guided video, obviously, and then our notes right here. If you want to go the old school route, you could always just come down here and click on plot guided notes. There'll be a date here in the future for you to know what day you're supposed to be working on it. So looking at plot, let's go through this, and we'll go through this with the lens of Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame. But before we get there, the structure or organization of events in a story is plot. Think of it as a roadmap to get you from point A to point B. Now, roadmaps don't always get you from point A to point B in a straight line. Sometimes it's curved, sometimes it's all over the place, and that's kind of what plot will be. It won't always be directly in a straight line, but just understand that it's basically what happens in the story. And so what is plot structure? Plot structure is the beginning, the middle, and end of a story. It is made up of 5 main parts, which we're going to go over here in a second. And essentially, you just need to note that one event leads to another, right? And we'll talk about that on the next slide. But just note the beginning, the middle, and end of the story. And when we look at plot, here we go. Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution are our 5 main parts. And what we basically want to note is that we're not going to just go from the exposition, this beginning here, and jump right into the climax, or jump right to the resolution, or right to the falling action. We have to go through the steps of plot, right? We have to move through it up this mountaintop, stop at the climax, come back down this mountaintop. Please make sure that you are pausing when you get a chance to stop and actually take these notes. I know I'm talking fast, so you will need to pause at times. But so let's look at what each section means and kind of talk about it using Avengers. So the beginning of the story, right? The start, the characters, conflict, and setting are introduced here. And it helps give meaning to the actions that are going to take place later in the story. And so this is where you would get introduced to Thanos and the Avengers and all those other characters. The setting would be Earth, initially maybe the universe and different planets that we're going to go to. And then the conflict, of course, being introduced here is that Thanos is going to find the Infinity Stones and eradicate half of the universe's population. So to talk about it in a broader sense, you are introduced to these characters, to this setting, to all of these things here, and you get an idea of what where the characters are, but you also get an idea of what motivates the characters. Why do the characters do the things that they are doing, right? Thanos thinks that, half of the universe's population is a problem, and that's what has motivated him to want to get rid of it. And the opposite, the Avengers have made a creed to protect the universe, and so they are here to try to protect and stop him from doing such a terrible thing. And so it gives you meaning for why these characters later in the story do the things they do, when they do them, and why they are intrinsically motivated to continue, and it's essentially what's driving these characters throughout the story. So the exposition is very important in identifying those things. And so as we moved into the story, you're going to have an initiating event right at the start of the exposition, and that's the start of that conflict. So again, in Avengers, this is Thanos going after the Infinity Stones. And so as he's going after the Infinity Stones, there's constant obstacles and problems that our main characters, the Avengers or whoever, are facing. And they're constantly going up this, and the suspense is building and building and building as he is trying to get it, and they're being stopped from preventing him, or each new hurdle, each new obstacle is standing in its way. And then we're leading ourselves up until we get to that climax. And this initiating event is an important event because whatever your main conflict is, that's what we're going to be following as we move up that rising action. And so as we move up that rising action, and finally we get to the most interesting part, we get to the turning point of the movie or the book, the most pivotal moment in the story. It is typically an intense moment. It is usually the main character is changed in some way. And it's funny because if you look at Infinity War or you look at Endgame, both of these climaxes are a character snapping his fingers. In Infinity War, it's Thanos snapping his fingers, and in Endgame, it is Tony Stark snapping his fingers. But in both of them, those characters are snapping their fingers. Now keep this in mind. they have different results, right? What are the results of them snapping their fingers? Like, but just also think to yourself, what have we been waiting for this entire time? Like, he's trying to eradicate half of the universe in Infinity War, and he finally does. And then in Endgame, we're trying to reverse what he did, and Tony Stark finally does. So that's what you need to be thinking about with climax. You are following your conflict to the story, throughout the story, until it finally comes to an end. When does that conflict come to an end? And that is your climax. And so then what is the direct result of that conflict? Ending the falling action. So in Infinity War, the direct effects are half the universe is gone. The Avengers are defeated. They just have given up hope. They basically have no recourse at that moment. Whereas in Endgame, the direct result is half the universe has come back. And if you haven't seen this movie by now, I'm sorry, but also the really sad direct event is Tony Stark has died. So we learn a lot about the characters. We learn a lot about our theme here. This is where the theme really starts to show itself, is in the falling action, because the conflict has ended and now we can take away what have the characters learned. And then we take from what they've learned and we move into this resolution, the point that the conflict has been resolved and the story has reached its end. Now, obviously, if it's not a sequel, you're not going to have that resolution. I mean, you're not going to have that direct resolution. All the loose ends might not be tied up. So, for example, in Infinity War, there's not really a nice, neat resolution, because like Tony Stark is trapped on whatever planet he was trapped on. Don't remember, and so everything should be resolved, but it's not always tied up in a nice, neat bow at the end of the story. So again, I just want to look at this really quickly one more time, because I know when we look here, you see this climax right here. It looks like it's in the middle of the story, but if you think about those two movies I just mentioned, those are like 3-hour movies. This does not happen, like the snapping of the fingers does not happen at the 90-minute, the hour and a half mark, right? It happens at the 2-hour and 45-minute mark, when we're right at the end of the story. The same thing is in books, right? The last 30 pages, that's where your climax is. So when you're looking for the climax, you need to be following your conflict till the very end, all right? And so now, I want you to pause the video. Why is it important? Why is plot structure important? So turn and talk to the people next to you, and just have a conversation with them about why you think plot structure is important. And then now that we've replayed our video, let's do our quizzes that is on your notes slide, and then move forward. We want to do this video, watch this video right here, and fill out what we think fill out the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution for each event in the story or in the video, and then read this short story, the shortened version of Princess and the Pea, and do the same thing. Fill in each box here. Okay, and then you're going to go ahead and turn these notes in when those things are done. And if we have time today, we want to take our mastery check on plot.